Under the crunch of chandeliers and the rustle of masks in Palazzo San Donato, she stood in the shadow of a column and counted her breaths. Leah Korolyova, 32, a translator and coordinator for international adoptions, had been brought out tonight as a success story. They asked her to smile and talk about bridges of love. She kept in her pocket an envelope with newborn wristbands and knew those bridges had taken the ground from under someone's feet. Valeria Orsini, a countess and head of the Lumen Infants Foundation, raised a glass in the middle of the hall and laughed without a sound, the way people laugh who are used to never raising their voices. Valeria wasn't an antagonist by genre, but by choice. She turned other people's weakness into her power and called it order. Leah saw the pledge cards being laid on the tables, heard the string quartet pretend that music was a speech. She wanted someone to ask out loud what exactly was going to be signed tonight, but she would be the one to ask. The morning began with fog. Vaporetto number 1 carried her along the Grand Canal toward San Stai, and the water looked thick as glass in an old window. She drank an espresso at the counter, ate a tramezzini with tuna, checked her pockets, a bunch of keys with a plastic fob, a tiny bottle of hand sanitizer, her phone with notes, the envelope with the wristbands. Inside the envelope lay 3 strips of plastic. The serial numbers ran so evenly it was as if someone had saved effort by not changing the template. That does not happen. She knew it as a document translator, as a person who had seen maternity wards from the inside, heard the tired cough of night orderlies, and the phrase, "for now," without a surname, spoken so lightly it was as if this were not a life. Marcello Zamboni, head of security at the Palazzo and a former carabiniere, waited for her by the side entrance. He had broad hands and the gaze of a man who holds the building plan and the exit routes in his head. 10 years ago, his sister's baby daughter vanished from a maternity ward. The case went stale. He did not say kidnapped. He said disappeared from the paperwork. It sounded worse. "If I give you a copy of the recording, they'll throw me out tomorrow," said Marcello, looking not at Leah, but at the empty courtyard where seagulls emerged from the fog. "I'll show you the time code, the container numbers, the barge route. You'll write it down. But you'll have no copies. My mother needs me alive." He said mother as simply as people say air. "If we don't give light, they'll drown us in silence," said Leah. "I know I'm asking you to take a risk, but otherwise nothing will happen." She spoke plainly because there was no other way. She wanted to believe words could turn into action if spoken without ornaments. Inside her lived a mix of fear and clarity. Fear was physical, sweaty palms, the cold plastic of the wristbands in her pocket. Clarity was logic. If you do not name the names, they will name whatever version suits them instead of you. They stood in a little room that smelled of old wax. On the table lay rolls of tape and boxes. On one was a crookedly stuck label, "Fragile," the letter G protruding past the edge, just like in the camera footage from a week ago at San Piera. Marcello turned on a monitor, rewound, stopped on a frame where the loaders, not museum staff, but somebody else's, were lowering gray-blue boxes off a barge. He said the mooring time and the barge number. Leah wrote it down. He named the private clinic with which Lumen Infants had signed a rotation of specialists. Leah wrote that down. He said, "I'm no saint, but I'm tired of watching children disappear from paperwork." And she felt clarity tightening its grip on fear. At midday she met by San Stai with Elsa, a 6-year-old girl with braids, the adopted daughter of one of the patronesses. Beside her stood a woman in a powder-pink dress, smelling of expensive soap and saying the right phrases about stability and love that knows no borders. Elsa held a stuffed rabbit with one ear torn off. Leah noticed the ears had been sewn back unevenly. One seam was rougher, meaning someone had mended it. "Children need stability, not scandals," said the patroness. Children need a mother, not a contract, said Leia, and a truth they can return to. She knew she sounded to this woman like one of those scolding people on the news. She did not care. Elsa looked up and said, as only children do when repeating what they have heard without any filter, Auntie said all the babies will find a home overnight. Which auntie? Asked Leah calmly. A lovely auntie, said the patroness. We don't mention names. And that we don't mention was a lock on the door Leah intended to walk through. She did not like elegant evenings. Elegant evenings did a disservice to the word mercy. In the palazzo, everything was neat. Carpets underfoot, paintings on the walls, the smell of varnish from them, chandeliers in the hall, their light shattering across the masks. The host rehearsed the good heart's oath, his voice rustling in the microphone like new silk. Valeria Orsini moved like a person who owns the space and made the room obey that movement. One glance, and the waiter was already changing a glass. One half turn, and the photographers were already capturing what they needed. 10 minutes before the start, Leah approached the host. 30 seconds, only positive, he said, smiling the way people are taught to smile when they work with sponsors. No heavy details? We have families listening. Positivity is truth, not decoration, said Leah. I need 1 minute without interruption. You'll ruin the atmosphere, he said. I'll ruin the shop window, said Leah. You're not a wax museum. The host sighed, patted the cards with the script and said, 1 minute, and that's all. Inside Leah it grew quiet. She needed only that minute. She knew sometimes 1 minute changes the day's direction. Igor Potapov, the foundation's contract attorney and her former fiancé, waited in an empty gallery. His suit fit as if it had been tailored together with his confidence. He did not like emotions and was proud of it. He used to pay for their dinners and say that sentimentality is the currency of the poor. Back then it sounded clever. Today it sounded cold. You'll wreck your life over emotions, said Igor. The machine will crush you. I won't be able to protect you. You don't want to, said Leia. When we argued about that case, you said, that's how the world works. I took the money for speeding things up then. There were 2 of us in that mistake, but the responsibility is mine. She did not plan to drag him into the light before the hall, but he needed to hear it from her. The lawyers will make an example of you, he said. They'll take your license. You won't get hired anywhere again. Who are you helping by this? Those who are still on the way, said Leia. Those who tomorrow will end up as a number in someone's report about love. She wanted to ask, whom do you need now? But she held her tongue. That would have been revenge, and tonight wasn't about that. Her own guilt lived in her, not as a plot, but as a bodily feeling. She remembered how a year ago a middleman handed her an envelope as a token of gratitude for fast work. She remembered Igor's heavy look. It's fine, it's faster, everybody does it. She remembered a signature stretched like tracing paper. She had not rechecked the birth mother's relinquishment. The baby was taken away. Since then, she split the day into before and after. She wasn't looking for excuses. She needed a chance to call things by their names and start thinking of herself as someone who fixes, not just records. Before the ceremony, she went into the storeroom. Boxes of props stood there, and it smelled of wax and fabric dust. On one box was a sticker with gray-blue tape and that same crooked G, as on the footage from the barge. It was the same seam. She ran a finger over the label and felt the stickiness. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from an unknown number arrived, a photo of her passport, and the text, "We'll conduct a status check for your own safety." It was a threat disguised as care. She turned off her phone because at that moment she did not want to hear someone else's certainty. By the staircase with marble lions, Valeria intercepted her. "You are a heroine tonight," she said gently, as if she were giving a gift. "Don't disgrace yourself with long speeches. Children don't like boredom. Leah looked straight into her eyes. Children don't like being sold, said Leah, and adults don't like when that is called by its name. Valeria smiled. The smile was smooth and empty, like a perfect shelf in a store. We are making the world better, said Valeria. You will be part of it, or you'll fall off the map. A switch clicked inside Leah. Her heart beat fast, but she knew that on stage she would say the first words and not stop. The host stepped out and gave an opening about nights when babies find a home. The hall laughed softly and nodded. Cameras lined up. Waiters flowed between tables, silver gleaming in their hands. Let us be inspired by kindness, said the host. Let us begin with honesty, said Leah, and stepped to the microphone. For a second it was absolutely quiet. She held the envelope in her left hand and felt the rough edge of plastic through the paper. It grounded her. I am Leah Korolyova, a translator and coordinator for international adoptions, she said. A year ago, I took money for speeding things up and did not recheck a mother's relinquishment. That was my mistake. It cost a child his mother. The words were simple and heavy. No one in a hall that lives on thank yous likes to hear an admission of guilt. But they heard it. Today I was given 30 seconds of positivity, said Leah. I'll take a minute of truth. She tore open the envelope, took out the wristbands, held them up to the light. These wristbands have the same first block of digits. That means they passed as a single line. That does not happen if they are different children on different days. This is a template. This is negligence, or a system. She said the mooring time and the barge number Marcello had given her. On the label of the box in the Palazzo storeroom, there is the same gray-blue tape and the same crooked G as in the port footage. This is a physical thing. You can touch it. It is not part of a speech. She held up a copy of a letter. In this document, the signature is an inserted picture. Any notary can see it from the shadow under the stamp. You cannot formalize consent about a child's fate like this. Someone coughed, nervous. Behind the camera shield's shoulders shifted. She listed simple things. A note from a mother with an old phone number that lay in the file. A photo of a newborn in a trolley taken by a nurse with today's Partnership for Every Child banner in the background. A stuffed rabbit with one ear torn off found in the disposal box, still bearing the maternity ward mark that matched the pallet of medical supplies. She said, I am not naming the mothers' surnames because they did not choose this stage, but I am saying their first names. I am not naming clients' names because this is not about them. This is about a system that replaces the word child with the word service. If you are truly about children, stop the memorandum today. Open the storage rooms. Allow an audit with the city. Protect the nurse who filmed and the guard who watched. I am handing over my phone. I am staying here until the end of the evening. But first, it's your turn. She finished and lowered the hand holding the wristbands. A glass fell in the silence. The chime of the glass was thin. Someone said, "Hey," not loudly but nervously. Elsa, sitting in the front row and eating a small almond cookie, suddenly spoke in her clear child's voice, as only she could. "Auntie, babies are not trophies." And that phrase passed through the hall like cold air, after which people begin to breathe. Someone clapped. One person, then another. The applause was hesitant, but not staged. Valeria raised her hand as if to join in, but her gesture hung in the air because a donor standing next to her suddenly took a step aside, like someone who does not want to be in the same photo. The host put his cue cards down. Marcello stood in the aisle and looked at Leah without nodding, because a nod would have been too personal, and now it was important not to jerk the hall with an extra gesture. Valeria walked up to the microphone and said, "We will conduct an internal audit." She said it as if announcing new desserts. But people were no longer looking at desserts. "The municipality will request the documents," said someone from the city council, who until then had stood like a prop and kept quiet. Igor moved back to a column and began dialing. His confidence wavered a little. He did not look at Laya. That was honest. He understood their conversation was over. The evening did not unravel into a brawl, because brawls were not staged here. It changed the scene. People stopped smiling on schedule. Journalists stopped filming the chandeliers and turned their cameras on hands. The hands were different. On one, rings. On another, a scar from a cut. On a third, a tremor. The questions became short. Will you show the box? Yes. Will the agreement be frozen? Yes. Will you name the notaries? The list is with the lawyers. Why identical digits? I am not an accountant. The questions were simple because complex ones only complicate the path at such a moment. The main thing was not to let them pretend nothing had happened. After the speech, Leah stood by a column and breathed. Her knees shook. She thought, I said it. It was like having her own name back. Marcello came over without touching her elbow. I saw on the cameras when you took out the wristbands, he said. Good. He did not say, I'm proud. He said, good, the way carabinieri say it when someone does not give in. They'll fire me later if they fire me, he said. Not today. Today they cannot. I know, said Leah. Suddenly she was frightened for real, not in her body, but for what would come next. But fear did not cancel a correctly taken step. She asked, Did you ever find words for your sister? He said, No. She said, Maybe today we found them. He smiled uncertainly. They both knew words are not a daughter, but sometimes they open a door. The patroness of Elsa approached. She held the girl's hand tighter than needed. You had no right, said the woman. This is a celebration. A celebration is when a child is with their mother, said Leah. Everything else is decoration. Elsa twisted her hand free, shook off the powdery grip with a burst of childish anger, and said, I'm thirsty. It was truer than any speech. A waiter set a glass of water before her. The girl drank and stopped being a shadow in the adult conversation. Leah felt something warm rise to her throat. Not tears, relief. That night she walked home along the platforms, and the fog lightened again. The city breathed evenly. On the phone she turned on along the way. Messages blinked. Municipality requests copies. The Foundation's press office announced an internal audit. The Migration Department is freezing fast-tracking pending review. Marcello, are you okay? Martin Grafe, a journalist and the father of a child with whom she had once argued in panic and harshness, wrote to her. He wrote, No tabloid stuff, just facts. Ready? She replied, Ready, but careful with the children. He answered, Understood. It was a rare accidental relief. Her apartment in Santa Croce smelled of damp wood. Leah set a pot on the stove, dropped in pasta, tore basil with her hands. She turned on the fish-shaped nightlight. In the corner stood a cheap child's crib she had assembled a week earlier. She had not bought it because she had a child. She bought it because she knew, one evening, a woman whose name she had spoken on stage today, or another, with a new voice, would call and ask, Can we spend the night? She needed an answer that did not sound like a speech. She took a bag from the closet and put inside a small blanket, pajamas, socks, a toothbrush. On the wall hung a sheet with mother's phone numbers and time zones. At the bottom, in crooked letters, she added, San Piera, barge, time. Next to it she pinned a photo of the stuffed rabbit with the torn ear. It was not a talisman. It was a reminder that things from disposal sometimes matter more than new ones. She sat at the table with her notebook and wrote, I admitted my guilt. I named the facts. This will not bring that child back, but it stops the deal-shaped form where children are a service. She put the wristbands beside her, took one off, and placed it in a separate envelope to hand later where it ought to be seen. She felt anger and fatigue. Anger was more useful than fatigue because it worked toward action, not toward pitying herself. Fatigue, she left for the night. Tomorrow she would have to go to the municipality, talk without rhetoric, ask without pride, stand firm without shouting. She knew how to do that. Who am I to teach others dignity, she thought, and answered herself, I'm a person who stepped out and spoke. That is enough to begin. She woke early, though the night had been short. New messages waited on the phone. Igor wrote, I did what I believed was right. She replied, so did I, and now we do different things. He did not write again. Marcello wrote, they took me off shifts for 3 days. For now, that's all. She answered, hang on. If you need anything, come over. I have pasta and a free chair. Elsa sent a drawing, a rabbit with 2 ears and the word home. The handwriting was childlike, unsure. It was more beautiful than many grown-ups' words. She went outside. The damp air filled her lungs. The vaporetto moved along the canal. People lived as if nothing had happened. That was both right and hurtful. But in a city where masks hang in shop windows, it is especially important that someone say things by their names. She thought of the women whose first names she had spoken on stage without surnames, and of those whose names she did not yet know. She thought of the child who went into that mistake together with her. Can one live on if one keeps silent? She knew, no. Can one live on after admitting it? Yes. It is harder than closing your eyes, but it is the only way to return to yourself. The municipality building was dry and empty. Papers rustled. Someone said, audit, like a foreign word you have to pronounce correctly, not to sound silly. Leah said, I'm not a lawyer. I brought things. Here are the wristbands. Here are the photos. Here is the mother's note. Here is the barge time. I will talk to the nurse if you protect her. I'll give you my phone number. I will remain available. They looked at her not as a figure on a stage now, but as a worker bringing in an important case. We'll send requests to the port, said a man in a gray jacket. We'll send a letter to the clinic. Please, without long formulations, said Leah. Where children are involved, time is not a dictionary. He nodded. It was not a promise, but it was movement. In the afternoon the hospital called, the same one where yesterday the medical supplies box had stood in the storeroom. We didn't find the box, said the administration. You hid it, Leah answered calmly. You have cameras. Check them. She knew that in such conversations you must not raise your voice. A voice is not an argument. An argument is an exact time, an exact number, an exact letter G. That was her weapon. And it was a weapon within reach for a person who has no army. In the evening she came home. The pasta in the pot had cooled. The fish-shaped nightlight glowed softly. She set another empty saucer on the table, not because she expected a guest that evening, because she wanted to remember that at any moment this table could become someone else's island. She did not romanticize it. She knew what someone else's fear smells like, and what warm water and a mug of tea do with it. Yesterday she had bought fabric for bedding and sewn sheets herself, crookedly but clean. She pinned a note on the door. If they call, don't ask for long. An unknown number kept calling. She did not pick up. She knew it would be another checkup call with an important voice. She set the phone to Do Not Disturb and heard someone laugh in the next apartment. The laughter was alive. Suddenly she smiled, not because she had won, because she was no longer a passenger in someone else's boat. Now she walked her own gangway. A day later, Igor sent another short line. I received a summons to give an explanation. She wrote, tell the truth. It will lessen the pain. He did not answer. Maybe he thought she was turning into a moralist. She did not care. Injustice loves silence. She had chosen a different style. Marcello phoned in the evening. They're calling me to the board of trustees, he said. There'll be a sit-down. You won't be alone, said Leah. I know, he said. I saw donors stepping away. This works slowly, but it works. If they fire you, she began. If, he said, cutting her off. Firing me now would be an admission They want to look smooth. They'll wait." They were silent. "Are you alone?" he asked. "Yes," said Leah. "I'll drop by," he said. "I'll bring bread. You never have bread." "I have pasta," she said. "Pasta without bread is sad," he said. It was the most normal conversation in days. When he came, they ate standing up, like people who do not have time to set the table properly. He told her more about his sister than before, what she looked like, how she laughed. He did not cry. He just spoke. "I didn't find the words then," he said, "and I did nothing. I thought it would never end." "It hasn't gotten shorter," said Leah. "We just stepped onto the other shore." "Mm-hmm," he said. "Your crib is the real thing," he added, glancing at the child's bed. "The real thing isn't the bed," said Leah. "The real thing is the readiness." He nodded. He understood. Later, when he left, she turned off the light and left only the fish nightlight on. The apartment was quiet. She lay down and thought, "Who am I now?" The answer came without beauty. "I am a person who speaks. I am a person who makes space for a child before the child knocks." That did not erase her past mistake. It did not bring back the child who was taken away. It did not make Valeria guilty on paper. But it gave Leah back her right not to be someone's accessory on a stage. And that was enough for today. Morning brought letters. The municipality reported a temporary suspension of the memorandum. The foundation announced a readjustment of procedures and an internal audit, written in rounded words. The press office wanted a 90-second comment without negative formulations. She wrote them one sentence. "A child is not a service and not a trophy, and every reform begins with that phrase." They asked her to soften it. She refused. It was not an act of rebellion. It was the keeping of a boundary she had returned to herself yesterday. The doorbell rang. A woman in a gray jacket stood on the threshold. Her hands shook. She did not give her name. She said, "They told me I can spend the night here." Leah stepped back, let her in, offered tea. The woman sat down, wrapped her arms around herself, looked at the child's crib, and closed her eyes. "You're not from the press?" she asked. "No," said Leah. "I'm Leah. I just say things." The woman nodded. "My name is Sylvia," she said, giving her name after all. She pulled a scrap of paper from her pocket with a few digits scrawled on it. It was a phone number, the very old one Leah had spoken of on stage the day before. Sylvia placed it on the table. "It doesn't work anymore," she said, "but this is my number." It was. Leah did not say, "We'll figure something out." She stood up, warmed water, took out a clean towel, and went to change the crib sheets. Because sometimes a properly done thing is not words. It is clean sheets and the overhead light switched off. Outside, the canals gleamed like ribbons. A city accustomed to carnival was, for 1 second, just a place where people breathe and eat. Leah noted a new line in her notebook. "Sylvia, tea, rest, municipality tomorrow." She closed the notebook and looked at the fish nightlight. The light was even. It did not promise that everything would be all right. It promised that inside this little room there is control over what can be controlled. Cleanliness, quiet, a place to sleep. It was not much, but it was honest. And in that honesty lay her new luxury. Not chandeliers, not masks, not names on plaques. The luxury of saying no where it is more habitual to nod. The luxury of admitting guilt without demanding applause. The luxury of cooking simple pasta for someone else's evening. The luxury of carrying in her pocket not a ball invitation, but a list of mother's phone numbers with time zones. The luxury of looking at Valeria without fear, because fear no longer rules, but simply warns where the step is. That did not erase the past, but it gave her back her shoulders. And when a person's shoulders are in place, they can hold up the sky just long enough for one more child to take a breath.